What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Crew 2, and in this video I'm going to take a look at the Aston Martin Vulcan after the Season 8 handling update. I would actually say this is going to be kind of an odd vehicle to also look at because I really never see anybody run this thing. It's also going to have slight visual upgrades if you guys do want to use it. The main reason why I'm mentioning that is, again, I really don't see people run this car though, and I actually think I'm going to know the reason why to that answer, but one thing I also have to mention, guys, can we get more Aston Martins on the Crew too? Maybe something like the Aston Martin DBS Superleggera I think would be awesome on the Crew too. Or who knows, maybe we might actually get something like that on Motorfest as well. But at the moment, guys, I do remember that car being on Need for Speed Payback, which is a pretty interesting game for that matter. But nonetheless, though, the Aston Martin Vulcan's definitely going to be a pretty interesting vehicle. The top speed on this car was actually a bit of a challenge to get because, for one, I noticed even with a nitrochemist set, guys, the top end power on the Aston Martin Vulcan's definitely going to be kind of odd. I was managing to get this car to go around 254 miles per hour, but I can definitely tell it could probably go to like maybe 257 to like 258 if you can manage to actually get it there. Now, I do think this is probably going to be this car's biggest flaw, though, is because I noticed after 245 or so miles per hour, this car really does seem to struggle a bit, which I do know other cars are definitely not struggling in that aspect. Even cars like the Pagani Zonda R that I recently did a video on as well, that car was not struggling to get to 255. I also noticed something like the Renault can hit 260 with no issues at all, so having a car that's actually struggling in the top end speed is definitely going to be an issue. Now, is this going to really affect the Vulcan on some of these smaller tracks? To be honest, I don't think it will, but I do think on like the bigger straightaways though, I do think this car will struggle slightly, because having that issue going through all your nitrous trying to get to a higher speed is definitely going to be an issue because you will need that nitrous around the corners, which sure, the Vulcan's definitely going to feel pretty dang fast with how it shifts. Is that truly going to be enough to make a lot of players actually want to try out the Vulcan? I would actually say, guys, even after this handling update, I don't think a lot of players are going to run this car. I really do think the overall top speed issue with it's probably its biggest flaw. Now, sure, you could easily still run this car on events and stuff and still probably score really well. Even run this thing in summits and still probably score decently, but even then, though, I also feel like a lot of players are just not going to choose the Vulcan over something like the Pagani Zonda R and or the Mercedes-Benz AMG GT3, which I do find both of those cars to be insanely good and also a lot better in a lot of aspects than the Vulcan. I really can't wait to test out some of the cars because I do have a feeling, even though these cars did get that handling update, that's not necessarily going to mean they're going to be insanely good. To be honest, guys, I'm slightly disappointed in the Vulcan in some ways, though, because I honestly was expecting this car to be a lot better, and one thing I was noticing is I actually like the Vulcan, the Duke, a lot more, which is going to be that Summit car. It's actually going to basically be blue compared to this one. I did find that car to be better than this Vulcan, even after the handling update, which in some ways I do find this to be pretty funny, considering the Duke is basically a different color than this car, and besides that, they're almost going to be identical in basically every way, but somehow that car is going to be slightly better with its overall speed and handling. Now, one thing I do have to say though, guys, is yes, this car is going to eat nitrous, which is probably never going to be a good thing with any car on the Crew 2, because you really do need the nitrous, especially on the touring cars because they handle so well. You can actually use the nitrous pretty often, so if you do fly through that trying to get your speed up, I do think that's definitely going to be an overall flaw with one of the vehicles. Even with this car not being the greatest thing I've used so far after the handling update, I still might try this thing out in some summits to see how it might do. Even though this thing has an issue hitting its top speed, I would still say around a track it might actually be kind of decent. I do want to know your thoughts on the Aston Martin Vulcan in the comments below, and do you guys plan on using this car in the future? I would say even with that weird top speed issue the car does have, I wouldn't say it's going to be like the worst touring car in the game. That is still left to be desired with how testing out these other cars are going to go. And here are the updated settings on this vehicle.